seen before. But one of the messages that I wanted to convey to the Muslims, as I found many Muslims would stand up in the question and answer session, and they would speak very strongly against the Muslim fundamentalist. These fundamentalists this, and these fundamentalists that. And I advise those people, as I advise you now, do not let the media and the agenda of those people who do not believe in our religion and who are not part of this precious ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, do not let them divide us further. They want to divide us into fundamentalists and moderates and modernists, and the more different groups they can divide us in, and the more they can have us fighting amongst each other and refuting each other, the more happy they will be. Therefore, I don't even like this term, fundamentalist Muslim, Islamist Muslim. Every Muslim must be a fundamentalist in the literal sense of the word, because we all believe fundamentally in Islam. We all believe the Quran is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We all believe that the Quran has remained unchanged and will remain unchanged until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lifts up the Quran from this earth. We all believe that Allah has sent with the Quran a messenger whose words were true words, whose example was the best example, whose life was a practical explanation of the Quran, and that this practical explanation exists with us today. And we call it under the generic term, the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We all believe in the Quran, and we all believe in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And whoever disbelieves in one verse of the Quran, or whoever comes to know of one hadith of the Prophet, and they know that this is authentic, and they disbelieve in it, they have disbelieved in the whole religion. This is what every Muslim believes. This is the fundamental of our deen. Of the fundamentals of our deen, the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and by extension also, that the people who understood this religion the best were the people who lived with and listened to and were taught by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his companions. The companions of the Prophet were the living students of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the Prophet prayed, they saw him praying. They saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was sitting on his camel and the revelation came upon the Prophet and it was heavy, so the Prophet would begin to sweat, and even the camel on which the Prophet sat began to sag and had to sit down from the weight of the revelation. His companions saw that. They lived with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Therefore, it is only logical and rational, and this is confirmed by the Quran. It is confirmed by the verses of the Quran that their understanding is the best understanding. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentioned in His book, the meaning of which is, whoever contends with the messenger and chooses a path other than the path of the believers, then Allah will leave them in the path they have chosen and land them in hell. What an evil refuge. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when he gave a khutbah, he gave a sermon, and the companions began, their hearts were moved, and they began to cry, and they began to feel as if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was saying goodbye to them, as if it was a farewell sermon. So one of them stood up and said, "O Messenger of Allah, it seems to us as if this is a farewell sermon, so advise us." They were waiting, hoping for some precious piece of advice from the Prophet ﷺ, that if he was to leave them at that moment, there would be something they could hang on to. And so these were the words of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, "I advise you to fear Allah. I advise you to fear Allah and to hear and obey your Amir, even if he is an Abyssinian slave." He said, "After me, you will see great differing. You will see great ikhtilaf, great differing." The Prophet is telling his companions that after I have gone, you will see people differing to a great extent. So he said, "Cling to my Sunnah and the Sunnah of the Khulafa ar-Rashideen, the rightly guided successors, and bite it with your molar teeth. Bite it, and beware of the newly invented matters in the religion." This was the advice of the Prophet ﷺ. He didn't just say, "Cling to my Sunnah," but he also mentioned the Sunnah of the Khulafa ar-Rashideen, the rightly guided successors, which means, of course, first and foremost, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and then Umar ibn al-Khattab, and Uthman ibn Affan, and Ali ibn Talib. These first and foremost are the Khulafa ar-Rashideen. And of course, the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which includes his wife Aisha and Fatima, and whoever else the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam included as his house. And then the righteous companions and the people of knowledge, people like Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abu Hurairah, and many other of the companions. These are the ones the Prophet told us to hang on to their example. When we see differing, we must always refer it back to Allah and His Messenger. Not our whims, not our opinions, not our desires, not our intellect, but before anything we refer always, when we have a disagreement about anything, we must refer it back to Allah and His Messenger. So the very essence of Islam, the very essence of what Islam means, istislam, to submit, to surrender to the will of Allah, obedience to Allah and His commands. This is the very essence of what Islam means. That is why the saying of the believers is always, Sami'na wa ata'na. We hear and we obey. We hear and we obey. So this is Islam. Submission to Allah, to the commands of Allah. And the commands of Allah are contained in His Sharia. The laws, the commands and the prohibitions that Allah has given us, whether they are the commands to pray and how to pray, to give charity and how to give charity, to fast and how to fast, to make pilgrimage and how to make pilgrimage, or the beliefs that we should hold about Allah and the angels and the messengers and the books and the divine decree and the life after death, or the laws by which we should live, what is halal and what is haram. This is the Sharia. This is the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The laws concerning divorce, the family laws, and the criminal laws, and international law. All of this is contained within the Sharia. So at the very heart and the very essence of what Islam teaches us is that we are people who submit ourselves to the law of Allah. To the law of Allah. And this is what it means to be a Muslim.